Hello, and welcome back to our study of the Church of Scripture. In today's short few minutes, we want to start to take up the question, what is the church? Before we get into that, I want to share a few little factoids with you that I think are related to this. If you had asked me a couple years ago how many times was the word Christian or Christians used in the New Testament, I would have said a bunch. I would have been wrong. The word Christian or Christians is actually used in the New Testament only 3 times. So what does the New Testament use to refer to people in the church? It turns out it uses the word saint. The word saint or saints is used 20 times more often than Christian, for a total of 60 times. But also in the New Testament, the word church or churches is referred to 102 times. What I draw from that is the church is an important topic. It wouldn't be mentioned that often if it weren't. So this idea of understanding what is the church clearly is important for us. And so we need to jump into that. We're going to turn to Scripture in just a minute. Before we do that, I also want to get an understanding of what does the world see when it sees the church, when it thinks of the church. With today's resources, you can go to an online search engine, type in definition of church and come up with that pretty quickly. And they're kept updated to stay current, as they say. So I did that, and what came up, and I didn't search for definitions that I thought would be great for this video. I took the first one that came along. It came up with 4 definitions for church. The first one was a building used for public Christian worship. The next one was an organization, typically with its own clergy, buildings, and doctrines. The third was the hierarchy of clergy of a Christian organization. And the final one was an institutionalized religion as a political or social force. I would tell you that those definitions are wrong. I say that boldly because I've looked in the Bible and that's not what the Bible has to say. So with that, let's turn to the Bible, look at some of those 102 verses. We're not going to look at all 102 today. I've picked a handful out for us to look at. In Acts chapter 8 and verse 3, it says that Paul destroyed the church by dragging off men and women. So how did he destroy the church? By dragging off men and women, by dragging off people. That's what the church was in that verse, was people. Acts 11 and 26 says, for a whole year, Paul and Barnabas met with the church and taught great numbers of people. The church was people. In Acts 15 and verse 30, it says they went down to Antioch where they gathered the church together. What did they gather? They gathered people. In 1 Timothy 3:5, it says, if anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? Referring to people, like his family refers to people. And in 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 18, it says, when you come together as a church, who's coming together? People are coming together. That's just 5 of the 102 verses. I have looked at all 102. I printed them all out. I read them all. I organized and categorized them. They refer to people time and again. They don't refer to a building, an organization, a hierarchy of clergy, or a political or social force. The word church in the New Testament, the word church in God's Scripture refers to people. Again and again and consistently. So why does the world think about these other things when it thinks of or defines the church? I think we need to be honest with ourselves and realize that the reason that the world sees the church in those terms is because when it sees or interacts with those of us who say we are a part of the church, that's what they see. That's what they experience. There's a whole nother lesson that can, and we'll do that lesson later on, about that, about how the world sees the church and how we might need to improve. But for now, let's just say that the world's view doesn't line up with God's view of the church. the world sees institutions and hierarchies and buildings, and God sees people. His church is people. That's kind of the only thing I want to cover today. Just we need to soak on that. That's something to meditate on, to pray about. But I'd make two observations before we close this short video. One is to repeat again that the world sees the church and defines the church by what it sees and interacts with. And we need to take responsibility for that. The second is that we haven't answered the question that we started with. The question was, what is the church? We've answered, who is the church in essence? But that's not the same as what is the church. If I were to ask you the question, who is the President of the United States, you would give me a simple answer. If I were to ask you what is the President of the United States, you would give me a different answer, a fundamentally different answer, because who and what are different questions. We've given a simple answer to who is the church. There's much more to learn about that. We'll talk more about that in upcoming videos. But we haven't answered what is the church. I hope you'll come back for the next video, because in the next video we're going to go on a brief journey to try to dig out of Scripture what is the church. I think it will be revealing. I hope you'll join us with that. Thank you for being here in this one. I ask that God continue to bless our journey together. We'll see you in the next video.